Welcome to the House of Brand, where we help unleash the true potential of your brand. If you're a business owner, leader, or C-suite executive and you're ready to scale your business to new heights, you're in the right place. I'm Torey Azure, your guide in turning your brand into a strategic advantage for your company. In each episode, we get straight to the heart of what it takes to build a brand that drives growth, that shapes culture, and fuels your marketing efforts. So let's get started. All right, everybody, welcome. Episode 1 is the House of Brand podcast, and so excited to those of you that are watching. In this first episode, I'd really just like to give you guys a kind of a background of why the podcast, who we're trying to talk to in this podcast, and what we're trying to solve for. And I think it's a good background to know, and hopefully good information for you so you can know whether you should subscribe and tune in. So with that, let me get started about me. My name is Torey Azure. I am a marketer of 30 years, involved with branding for 30 years. It wasn't my main profession to start. I was a civil engineer by trade, but was always, involved in brand and art throughout my whole career. And so eventually that turned into this. When I say this, I'm sitting right now in Brandcraft, which is our agency. I started out as a freelancer in 2012. I'd had an agency before in partners, but I kind of broke out and just started freelancing. That turned into growth of the agency, expanded into 3 different cities, grew from, a very modest income that would be enough to support a person to a multi-million-dollar agency that we have now. It's been a great experience, and I think our brand process as we grew the agency has turned into something where I think it's time to share, and I think it's time to talk about some of the brand issues that exist, especially for a certain segment of the market, which I'll talk about a lot more as we continue this podcast. So I want to introduce this concept of flyover brands. So you guys might know, if you're a country music star, there's a song out there about flyover states, and that country star didn't invent that term, but flyover states is about this like middle America that you basically fly from coast to coast, and what you cross over are flyover states. And so why do I talk about flyover brands? Well, to me, flyover brands is that middle segment of the market that really, it just comes below the Fortune 500. It's a mid-market. It's not, or emerging mid-market. And they live in a world of resources, but the resources really aren't always meant for them. And what do I mean by that? If any of you go out and buy a book about brand, or you, blogging's a little bit different, podcasts can be better, but a lot of the best literature out there, the most in-depth and the longest form content about brand, is often written by former executives. And when you read it, they give a lot of examples, or they give, they'll provide you and say, hey, in my career, I did this, or this is what we did to solve this problem. And where the disconnect can come from people like me that serve this mid-market, and even small business, the disconnect is when somebody from this major Fortune 500 brand says, well, this is what we did to solve this problem. And, I was working with a really reduced budget of $10 million for this brand. And you begin to think, I am nowhere near where this person is. I don't have 10 million for a product brand within our own company, a product brand. In fact, I don't have 10 million to define our brand. I don't have anywhere close to that. And that $10 million budget, just to let you know, I don't think this person was saying that was their budget just for brand, but to launch this new product. So they definitely had a budget for brand. I think that a conversation can happen for those in the small business or mid-market about what brand really means, about how to use a brand, how to be effective with it. What does a brand mean when I'm trying to reach the 5 million mark, the 10 million mark, the 50 million mark? What does brand mean to me in those different stages? And I think that's an important conversation. Not what does a brand mean to a $5 billion corporation. And that's the conversation that happens most often. I'd love to switch that. So that's flyover brands. That's what flyover brands means. It means that that's the audience I want. For those of you that you believe exist in this flyover brand stage of, no one really knows about me outside of my region. No one really knows about my company in, outside of 100 miles from where I operate. Our agency, Brandcraft, is known in each of the 3 cities we work, and not really known outside of that. We have a few customers, of course, throughout the nation. And so, there's bits and pieces of people knowing our brand, but it's not national. People don't know us throughout the nation. I don't expect that they're going to in the next 5 years. So that's not what we're trying to accomplish. What we're trying to accomplish is to reach our core audience the best way we can, with the best messaging that we can, and not worry about top level awareness to everybody in the world. So that's important. So I talked in that definition about flyover brands of small business and emerging mid-market. And so let's try and define a little bit about what that means. The U.S. Small Business Administration has their own definition of what small business is. For us, and who I think would benefit most from our podcast and what we talk about, are those people that have businesses that are between probably 25 and 100 people. It could apply to businesses with more than 100, and it can certainly apply to businesses with only 10 employees. But that's kind of the target, the small business. I think at 25 people, if we look at revenue, I would say, 5 million to 50 million, 5 million to 100 million is kind of that category of where I think this small and mid-market benefits most from the topics that we talk about in this podcast. And if you fall within that range and within a certain, I would say, target market, I think this podcast would be very beneficial. So like and subscribe and make sure that you keep up with us to learn some of these techniques that we use for brand to ensure that you have success in marketing. So another topic I'd like to talk about is this idea, and it goes along with flyover brands, this idea of a second stage company. And again, a second stage company is another valuable point because a second stage company is going through an inflection point. And here at Brandcraft, we like to talk about the fact that when you're going through an inflection point is often when we are best engaged with a client to make change and define the brand in a different way. So Edward Lowe defines what a stage 2 company is, and they define problems that these stage 2 companies have. So second stage founders have got their company to a point in which they're not fighting for existence any longer. So stage 2 companies, what they need most are a team really aligned with their founder, really aligned with that vision, a team that can execute, a team that can come and do a lot of the things the founder did to get them over that next stage. But stage 2 companies are also having issues, and there's issues that they need to address and talk about. And one of those can be brand, but I think sometimes the issues show up as different problems. It's not always brand. They raise their head or they raise their ugly head in ways that, it can confuse founders, can confuse those that are trying to manage the company because they can't figure out where this is coming from. So second stage companies can be overwhelmed. And at this stage, they're not always overwhelmed with work. They're not always overwhelmed with their client base. They're overwhelmed with growth problems. And in that overwhelmed stage, they're trying to find solutions. They've maybe made the decision that those solutions aren't always more employees, aren't always bringing people more in-house, but that these problems need a different solution. And I need to think about how to solve these. And they start reaching out for help. And it's good that they reach out for help because it's important that I think you get a second look as to, okay, what's happening and how do you get past this growth stage? Another thing that stage 2 companies realize that they have to do is really have focused opportunities. And that can mean that they need to define their audience better. They need to define their ideal client better. They really don't know their ICP. They built the company being liked by a lot of different people. And right now they're trying to decide, okay, do we really need to focus on a niche or do we need to focus on a certain client? Do we need to make that more approachable? Do we need to make our brand more approachable to the ideal client? These are great conversations to have. Some of the most fastest growing companies do a very good job of this at the foundational start. They really define who their client is. They really define who their ICP is. They define the product and make the product so that it appeals to them. And they scale very quickly and they can reach high growth with that. Not every founder does that though. And not every company has that vision. And in fact, sometimes you need to pivot. Sometimes you find out that what people really value from you is something different than you imagined. Either way, you're at an inflection point. You got to figure it out. You want to define it. But what you really want is you really want that focus to say, I know who my client is, and I want to reach them through marketing in a better way. And right now, the way that we got from $0 to $10 million, it's not going to get us from 10 to 50. We have to do something different. That's a stage 2 company problem as well. Stage 2 founders have realized that they have to start having process and systems within their organization, and that they're not going to be the one that can control everything in the next stage of growth, that they have to have leaders and people that they give responsibility to that can handle certain aspects of the company. Now, I will tell you one area in which I diverge a bit from how Edward Lowe defined it and the problem solving that he did. And if you go to their website, you'll see kind of the foundation of what they believed and his story about what he did with his company. The biggest difference I believe that I've seen is, and it's not just from the teachings of Edward Lowe, business coaches in general will often bring in front of you this idea that as you start to scale and you start to become this stage 2 company, one of the things that you need to do is you have to start letting go of certain aspects of the company, and you need to start working on the company and not in the company. And I think, like anything, you have to make sure you take one aspirin and you don't take the whole bottle. And sometimes I think leaders start to hand over too much to their employees. And let me define that even further. Brand is one of those things they hand over to their employees that I think causes problems. I think that the original founding ethos, the original founding promise, the original founding reasons to believe of that founder get lost in that process of them disconnecting in certain ways. So at Brandcraft, we try and reconnect that leader to the brand and try and reconnect all the employees back to that brand as well. And in the next few episodes, I'll explain more about our process and how we do that. But really, that's what we're trying to do, is say, leaders, you're important. And yeah, we want you to work on the company and not in the company, but brand is one of those things that we just think is really the DNA of the company. You can't leave it alone. You can't ignore it. You could certainly have people contribute to it, of course, but you can't just hand it off to somebody and say, I trust you. What you're basically saying is, I trust you just to operate the company. It's almost like CEO responsibility. I wouldn't do that. Let's say you're a stage 2 company, or you're a small business, or you're a mid-market, and you're listening to this and you're thinking, you know what? I wonder if we have problems with our brand. And you wonder, like, what are symptoms of that? Or what have you seen to say, hey, we might have a problem with brand? So a few of those we'll cover quickly before we close out this first episode and move into the first episode about positioning. Yeah, so some of the symptoms of this idea that maybe you've lost control over the brand, they come forward in many different ways. One of them is actually through sales and marketing. So the company has scaled fairly quickly, let's say. You guys went from, a very low amount of revenue to 10 million quickly. You got to 15 million, it took a little bit longer, and now things have plateaued. And marketing doesn't seem to really be working. We're having a tough time getting. We don't know why our growth path in the past was 30% a year, sometimes higher. And all of a sudden now we're struggling to get single-digit percentages of growth. And we've noticed our marketing seems to not really produce the leads that we thought it did. And I think you might look at that and say, we have a marketing problem. We need a better agency. We need a different agency. And often when an agency comes to us on the digital side, we do digital marketing as well. When they come to us on the digital side and they say, yeah, we've been through a couple other agencies and we just can't really find the performance that we need, it's one of the first indications that they probably have a brand problem. They have a messaging problem. They have a customer problem. They have a focus problem. And that is when you start to identify, no, it's not really an agency problem. It's not a digital agency problem. It's not an AdWords problem. It's not an SEM problem. You have a problem with brand and you haven't defined it. You haven't positioned. You haven't done the things you need to do to really get it, to where it needs to be as an agency or as a company. Sorry. Another symptom that we see is when founders start to believe that their employees and the group that works for them no longer understands the vision. You go talk to somebody and they don't know why we're doing what we're doing. They don't know what the secret sauce is. They don't know why did we have success? How did we get to 15 million in revenue? All they know is I'm supposed to bring in more customers. I'm supposed to treat the customers this way. I'm supposed to do whatever it might be. And the founders start to realize and look at this and say, I don't believe the team that we have or the actions they're taking or their belief system really matches what I originally intended for this company. I've lost control of that type of thing. So the values become very important. What are the values of the people that you want to bring into your organization that are going to help you reach the goals to treat customers the way you want through a brand promise. And that, when you identify it, is a real big light bulb to say, I think we've lost control of the brand. It's another way of saying, I'm not really in alignment with my own employees, you as the leader. Another symptom is just misalignment in the product as it's delivered. How can this happen? Well, the misalignment happens when the original founder and then through his executive team have an idea of what they're solving for the client. But then that product, as it's delivered and marketed, isn't marketed in a way that it was originally envisioned and what it was to solve for. And so when it goes out to marketing, there's a message, there's a way to get people to engage. So marketing messaging could be great. Let's say it is great, and let's say it's working and bringing people in. But yet those same people aren't getting the same message from the sales team. The sales team isn't saying the same thing. The sales team is saying something different. And they're saying, well, no, the biggest reason you want to choose us is because of this. And they give them reasons to choose it, but that's not the reasons the marketing is telling them. And ultimately, that's not what even the leader and the executive team believes is the reason to choose the company. So again, a lot of misalignment that happens here. Now, the biggest drain on a company can happen when there's misalignment between the marketing team, the sales team, and finally with the product delivery team. Those that are actually doing the work in a service company, or the product that's actually delivered in a product company, isn't what marketing marketed, isn't really what the sales team sold. It's something completely different. So with that, those are just 3 symptoms. And there are a lot that we've seen as we've worked with brand with different companies, as we've worked with brand in small to large companies. We see symptoms all the time of areas in which the brand could really give the company a foundation to start from. And that's what we try and give people, is that foundation. So with that, really the podcast is about uncovering a lot of these issues. It's about talking about them. It's about defining with you, helping you work through your own brand if you want to try it on your own, and trying to, share with you some of the pitfalls we've come across, share with you some of the successes we've had. And hopefully you can learn something from this, maybe redefine your brand a little bit. Look forward to any comments that you guys give, and stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks for watching.